Record session. So just to announce that I'm recording the session, and the recording will eventually be put on the SENDEF website for all to share in case they are not able to join. Yeah. So as I was saying, this is the third webinar in a series on critical conversations, and it is sponsored by the Open University Malaysia's Center for Digital Education Futures, or CENDEF in short. And I'm glad to see that there are many people joining us today. Welcome and good morning to all. Today's session will be led by Professor Melinda Bandalaria. Let me introduce her. She is professor and former chancellor at the University of the Philippines Open University, or UPOU. She served as president of the Asian Association of Open Universities and has advanced regional efforts in massive open online courses, or MOOCs, universal design for learning, micro-credentialing, and open educational resources. The hashtag OpenFight initiative supported other educational institutions to transition to remote education during the COVID-19 pandemic. So today, Professor Bandalaria is going to talk about quality open distance e-learning, or ODEL, in the AI era. So I will now pass the floor over to Professor Bandalaria, who will take us through slides for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A. So as you're listening, please, if you have questions, do post them in the chat box. Yeah. On to you, Professor Bandalaria.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, David. And yeah, good morning, everyone. Good day to all, and warm greetings from the Philippines. So, allow me to start my presentation. I would like to share my slides, which can guide my discussion this morning. Okay, so I hope it is.
Yep, it's coming through clearly.
Yeah, so you can see it clearly.
Yep.
Okay, so again, good day, everyone. And as introduced by David, the title of our session today is Quality Open Distance E-Learning in the AI Era. And as introduced, I am from the University of the Philippines, Open University. So first, I would like to thank OUM for this opportunity to share my perspective about quality in open distance e-learning, especially in this era of artificial intelligence. I also thank OUM for engaging me as one of their global fellows, of which this webinar is a part of. So, for this presentation, for our session this morning, as mentioned by David, this is the third in the series. And for this session, I will be focusing on quality. And therefore, the session will consist of first, deconstructing the discourses on the criticisms on quality of distance education. I also would be taking you to a journey or having a cursory look at a QA framework for open universities and technology-enabled programs and courses. And as the last point of my presentation, I will be recommending a proposed tweaking of the standard pillars of quality in open distance e-learning to accommodate the use of artificial intelligence. So, okay, so here goes. So why quality? Of course, I've been working in an open university for the past 30 years or so, and that's the University of the Philippines Open University. We are one of the constituent units of the only national university in our country. That's the University of the Philippines. Our mandate is to democratize access to quality higher education through the distance education mode of delivery. So for that span of time, that's about 30 years or more than 30 years, I will say, I can pinpoint three major instances when discourse about quality in this mode of instructional delivery became more dominant or a hot issue, at least from the perspective of the UP Open University. So the first instance was during the establishment of the Open University. And I think for many of us working in an open university, if you will go back to the history of your university, you can also sense something like this. The reaction towards the establishment of the open university with the argument that it is of lower quality compared to a residential or conventional university. So when Tate looked at it, evaluated it, and look also at the journey of the open universities, and in his publication in 2018, he concluded that it could be the absence of a campus experience that really made these criticisms or the cause of these criticisms. At the time, um, UP has been in existence for more than 100 years, but when the UPOU was established, the question of credibility or quality became a hot issue, and that is the quality of instruction being offered by the Open University. But the Open University, from where, that's the UKOU, Open University in UK, from where many other open universities in the world were modeled, has pioneered the line of argument that outcomes are important, especially since when it started implementing open admission to its programs and courses. So many open universities are also doing this, opening admission to the programs and courses. And the counter argument to the lack of campus experience is, let's look at the outcomes, the learning outcomes of our programs and courses. And for us at the Open University system, that is more important. So distance education scholars and practitioners provided the construct that the outcomes of quality education, that is providing learners with capabilities they require to become economically productive, develop sustainable livelihoods, contribute to peaceful and democratic societies, and enhance individual well-being can very well be achieved in this mode of instruction. Instructional materials developed not just by one person, but by a team composed of the subject expert, reviewed by another expert for accuracy, an instructional or learning designer, who ensures the alignment of courses learning outcomes with assessment and content, teachers who are not just experts in the field, but were also trained to teach in this mode of instruction, and relevant and timely learner support services were the major pillars of quality during the early years of implementing distance education. So when we look at the history or the way we've been doing distance education right from the start, there are already pillars of quality, even during the generation one of distance education, when we were using printed modules and we just have the once a month or regular tutorial sessions in our learning center. So OUM also has many learning centers geographically or strategically located in the country. And those learning centers of the university is also one of the pillars of quality education in the mode of instruction that we are doing. So the second instance was with the introduction of the internet, and when online learning was integrated into the teaching and learning ecosystem of distance education. The modern ICTs not only bridge the physical distance between the teachers and students, it completely changed the way distance education is being done, which include, among others, the possibility of real-time interactions between the teacher and the students and among the students themselves. So we can see here that by using these modern ICTs, the online technology, for instance, we also have a counter argument or a counter proposition with regard to the absence of campus experience. This time, this is a mediated campus experience. There is the interaction between the students and the teachers and among the students themselves, and if necessary, connecting the learners with the different elements of the campus life. So the quality of instructional materials were also enhanced with the possibility of using online educational resources. So there can be the variety of educational resources, and not just one source, not just the teacher, but the variety of educational resources when we started integrating the online technology to our ecosystem. The argument at the time was it was so easy. So for those who are criticizing distance education, their argument was it was so easy for students to copy materials from the internet to complete their course requirements. Indeed, that is true, but the same can also happen in a residential instruction. So the pattern presented by these two instances pointed us to a bottom line wherein quality is equated with the students and the teacher being together in one physical space. And this was also articulated by Alan Tate in his 2018 publication. Now, with this increased level of doing online learning or integration of the online component to distance education, DE practitioners and scholars again try to come up with quality assurance frameworks, clearly defining the different pillars of quality in online learning. So there are different pillars. I mean, QA frameworks. If you will search the internet, you can find many organizations involved in quality assurance in online learning, publishing their QA framework for this mode of instructional delivery. So these QA frameworks serve as internal guide when developing programs and courses offered online and in evaluating them as well. As I have mentioned, there were many QA frameworks for online learning that became available as open access materials, meaning to say we don't have to pay to access or use them. This is a good move as it is also a strategy of saying that, hey, we practitioners or scholars of open distance e-learning, we can also assure the quality in this mode of instruction in the same way that there are QA frameworks for residential or in-person learning. So in 2018, the Association of Open Universities, that's AAOU, as also mentioned by David in his introduction, in order to serve better its more than 60 institutional members, develop its own QA framework. It's a QA framework for open universities and for technology-enabled programs and courses. It did a survey of the available QA frameworks like the APEC Quality Assurance of online learning toolkit, the QA framework of the Commonwealth of Learning, among others. The review focused on what are considered to be the pillars of quality in online learning. The outcome or the resulting list was further vetted by the experts from the different open universities in Asia. So we also presented this to the other leaders of the open universities in Asia, and they also gave their feedback on the list of pillars that we were able to come up with when after doing this survey of the many QA frameworks for online learning. So these experts came from the different universities or open universities in Asia with long tradition of doing distance education and many years of experience doing online learning. So the vetting process included the rationale behind the inclusion of such pillar and what evidence or artifacts can be included or can indicate or show that such pillar is being practiced or implemented. So now let's take a look at the AAOU QA framework for distance e-learning. So in this QA framework, as I have mentioned, this was drawn from the many QA frameworks that have been developed by other universities and associations. So there are three clusters in this framework: management and leadership, which consists of the vision, mission, management, and planning; leadership and strategic management; infrastructure; and human resource development and management. The second cluster is academic, consisting of the course design, program design, learner assessment, and learner support services. The third cluster is impact and external outreach, which consists of two sub-criteria: research and community service. We have to note that under each subcluster, evidence or artifacts were identified to show the practice or the implementation of this particular pillar. So in an online mode of delivering instruction, these are the more or less standard pillars of quality with the greater weight assigned to the academic component, but not totally ignoring the other elements that are essential to provide the conducive teaching and learning environment and give the students a very good journey or a learning experience or learning journey. So this QA framework was piloted in 3 open universities in Asia. One, of course, is the Open University Malaysia, Universitas Terbuka, and the University of the Philippines Open University. After the 3 pilot runs, which subjected the framework to further evaluation by the people who themselves are involved in implementing distance e-learning programs, we at AAOU thought we are all set. And at least for the time being, we have something that we can use to ensure the quality of instruction in open distance e-learning. But then again, OpenAI happened. So that's the third. The third instance is this AI, the generative AI specifically. This is another disruption which once again triggered the resurfacing of the discourse on quality of education in the distance e-learning setup. The question now is, how are you ensuring the quality of instruction and the outcomes expected of quality education when there is already a wide variety of AI tools which can help the students in completing their course requirements. This is really true, you know. I mean, those of us who have experience using AI to help us in our teaching, we are all aware that yes, there are many tools which the students can also use so that they can complete their course requirements. Now, let's take a look at some of these AI tools. So I think the most popular AI tools are for conversation and productivity. So we have the Chat GPT, a leading chatbot for content creation. So many of our students are already using it. Gemini, I have seen many of my colleagues preferring the use of Gemini over Chat GPT. It is a versatile tool from Google. It has a strong conversational ability and creative generation. And probably that's the reason why many IT experts prefer Gemini over ChatGPT. We also have the Microsoft Copilot, the Cloud AI, and the Perplexity. So these things are all, or these tools are all available and can be used for free. So there's no wonder our students are also using this in the same way that we teachers are also using this. So that's for conversational and productivity. Now for image and video creation, we have the Midjourney, the Adobe Firefly, and the Synthesia. So this, if we want to produce video materials, and this is something that I always ask my students to do, then these are also the tools that they can use to complete their course requirements. In many cases, even the audio component, instead of them doing the voiceover for their video production, even the audio component, they are using AI. It's as if I will be marking the how the voiceover was done and not really the content. So usually I ask them not to do it, because at the end of the day, what I want to happen is when they talk about the course or the content of their presentation, they will also be learning something about it. Now, for those IT people and developing IT programs, etc., then they have the Llama, the GitHub Copilot, the Amazon Q Business, and the 11 Labs. So what we can see here as our bottom line, there are many tasks that are usually the focus of our learning activities that can now be done by AI. So the thing is, how are we going to approach this particular issue or concern so that we can also continuously ensure the quality of the education that we are delivering online? So I just want to tell you a short story about when OpenAI's ChatGPT was released to the public in November 2022. So I was still a chancellor of UPOU at that time. So when I saw, I mean, when I came across the release, the public release in November 2022, my immediate reaction was, it may prove to be even worse than the COVID-19 pandemic for us whose business is online learning and are serious in providing quality education to our various types of learners. The immediate plan, because and that was the immediate plan that I put in place, was for us to go back to the drawing board and review our learning activities, including our assessment mechanisms, institutional policies on plagiarism, and how AI can help further enhance the quality of our instruction. When COVID-19 hit us in 2020, we were like business as usual because we've been doing online learning for a long time. So it's something like, okay, it's online learning, and that is something that we've been doing for so many years already. But when this AI happened, ChatGPT, for instance, then we really had to mobilize our academic staff so that we could go back to the drawing board and review especially our learning activities. In a projection released by one website, there will be about 1 billion users of Gen AI by end of 2025. That's 1 billion. The same website reported 400 million ChatGPT users in February 2025, which doubled to 800 million weekly users in September 2025. So we can see here the the tremendous increase in the number of ChatGPT users. So these figures affirm what we have suspected all along, that Gen AI or ChatGPT specifically and similar tools are here to stay. It is therefore necessary for us to revisit the QA framework for open distance e-learning to make it relevant in the AI era. This is equally important given that many universities are now going towards that direction of offering courses and programs in the distance e-learning mode, drawing from their experience of doing remote teaching and learning during the time of COVID-19 pandemic. So let's take a look again. Let's revisit the QA framework for online learning to accommodate the use of AI. So taking a look again at the AAOU QA framework, so under the lead management and leadership cluster, so we can see here, I have highlighted the changes where tweaking can be done to accommodate AI. So under management and leadership, one is for IT infrastructure, and that is making available courses and support to allow teachers, staff, especially those providing learner support services, to have access to OpenAI's platform, most recent and reliable version, the version that is not prone to hallucination. I remember that time when the university made that decision to shift to online learning, that was in 2001, or started to integrate the online component to our teaching and learning environment in the form of online tutorials. We provided internet allowance to our faculty members and made available computers with internet access in all our learning centers. Teachers, tutors, and yes, even students can use these facilities for free. So why not do the same for AI platforms to be available to our, not only to our teachers, but also to our staff and even to our student. Policy environment. It is important to have an institutional policy on the use of AI so that everyone will be guided, especially the students. In January 2024, UPOU released its institutional policy on the use of AI by both teachers and students. Concretizing it in my courses, I made it as a course policy that the use of generative AI tool without proper citation can be considered as plagiarism, on which the university has specific policies. One specific case is also how the University of Michigan have developed or has developed their AI policies that give faculty clear guidelines for different types of assignments. In their institutional policy or at the course level, they have to be transparent so that we can help students make ethical choices. We have to be explicit about when AI is allowed, when it is not allowed or prohibited, or when it is required. This will help our learners prepare for the workplace environment. That is something that we are not we are not preventing them to use. In fact, we are teaching them how to use AI, but ethically, properly, and responsibly. The third component, other management and leadership, is human resource development. This covers not only the training of the university staff on how to use AI to harness its affordances and make their lives easier so that they can focus on more important things or part of their work, and how to use it responsibly and ethically. So the how to use it so that it can help in their daily tasks, especially the automation, and how to use it responsibly and ethically. There should be training for students as well. In fact, designing AI training as part of learning and development program for the staff and micro-credentials for the students may provide a strong push for enrollment and course completion. So that is one strategy by which we can really force our staff and students to enroll in the AI training courses that we will be offering in our respective universities. Now, for the second cluster, the academic cluster. So as expected, the academic cluster of quality are the most affected. Those pillars under the academic cluster are the most affected in this AI era. So the first is how can we tweak what we are doing now so that we can accommodate AI. The first is through our instructional design, or what is also being referred to as learning design. So how can we adjust our instructional design in the age of AI? A good reminder for us teachers who are sometimes also the learning designer as a starter is AI is a tool, it is not the teacher. At its core, instructional design is about people and not about technology. Learning design should therefore focus on crafting a good or very good learning experience or journey for our students that first resonates on a personal level, and that the learning activities, including assessment, should encourage critical thinking, problem solving, and hands-on application rather than passively delivering content, which ChatGPT can very well do. So learning design should facilitate the different levels of connections and interactions, which are essential to learning. I mean, this framework has been we're doing this for many of our instructional design work. So facilitating the connection and interactions within the course. So that is the learner content interaction, learner teacher interaction, and the learner learner interaction. So that has to be designed in our courses. Collaborative projects can be designed that would help achieve the learning outcomes. Real life scenarios like case studies or projects that reflect the real challenges that learners face in their everyday lives can also be integrated either as part of the lesson or learning activities. In my courses, I would add learner community of practice interaction, as that will provide learners with anchor on real life experiences and situations, because they will be interacting with peers or fellows from the same profession, and they will be more knowledgeable about what are the concerns of the profession that they are in. So when learners see the direct application or relevance of what they are learning, it feels more personal and impactful. Again, something that at this point, at least at this point, AI will not be able to do. Also, in my online courses, I would start the semester with the usual self-introduction, but with an additional question of each learner narrating his or her personal experiences related to the topic of the course. So like for instance, if it is social mobilization that I am teaching, I would ask them to relate a personal experience about social mobilization or corporate social responsibility. The learner will use the case as we discuss the different lessons and concepts in the course. So for the whole semester, each learner will be building on and making as an example or context the example that he or she used when he or she introduced himself at the start of the course. So it is like each student represents a unique real case or real life case or study. The design must also focus on translating theoretical knowledge into practical skills and in the process, make learning active, relevant, and immediately applicable to the context of the learner. The process can also encourage critical thinking. If we are to pose questions like, how will you improve the implementation? Or what's your theoretical underpinning for your recommendation if there is a recommendation to improve the implementation of a project cited. So our bottom line here is learning design should be human-centered, characterized by empathy, connection, and creativity, and not technology-centered. So that kind of learning design can only come from the human learning designer and not something that is generated through AI. Of course, AI can help us, but definitely we have to put or we have to make it ours. So like we ask AI to help us in designing the course, but at the end of the day, we have to make that output ours, or make the AI output yours, the teachers, meaning personalize it so it will use your own words and style. For instance, I have mentioned AI can generate a quiz that aligns with your course or lesson learning outcomes, but you can further contextualize it so that it can be more relevant to the course and to the learners. The other strategy is for us to review and reflect on the course learning outcomes. We're always, when we do instructional design, we always have this strategy of looking at the course learning outcomes or the backward design process. We look at the course learning outcomes and then move to the objectives, content assessment, etc., or outcomes assessment, content, and objectives. So that we are used to do in doing when we do instructional design. In doing so, in reviewing our course learning outcomes, we identify the skills that AI has not yet mastered or AI cannot yet do at this point. So focus on them, focus on the skills, and have our learning activities generate those or be able to show whether the students were able to learn those skills and knowledge that are also the focus of our learning outcomes. As what UNESCO has forwarded, in a world where AI can provide answers, the ability to evaluate, critique, and synthesize information becomes more important. So we can probably focus on that and align these skills to our learning outcomes. We need to design learning activities that would require students to critique, compare, or build upon AI-generated content. For example, have students ask AI about questions that are related to the lesson being discussed. Have them fact-check the AI response using credible resources. This is always one of the learning activities that I give to my students in all my online courses. Now, for the assessment. Again, assessment is a very critical pillar of quality. And or when we evaluate universities or programs in terms of quality, what we focus on is how assessment is being done. Take note that we don't see our students. Our students are not on campus, except probably for some open universities wherein examinations are done, proctored, sit down, proctored. But in some open universities, like in my university, we do our assessment also online. So we have to admit it. AI tools like ChatGPT have significantly disrupted our traditional notion of assessment. We are in this era when a machine can generate essays, solve complex problems, and even code a computer program. So if these are the things that we are asking in our assessment, then we are really have problems here. We are now faced with these questions. What skills should we assess? And how do we evaluate learning in a world where AI can perform tasks once thought uniquely human? The advent of AI requires a shift on how we develop, design, and administer assessments. I remember in 2022, again, when OpenAI was made available to the public, one of my colleagues, another official at the university, said, then probably, we can go back to sit down and proctored examinations so that we can be assured that it's our students who are taking the exam. And I said, are there other ways by which we can do it? Because it will probably be too restrictive for our students to go to a learning center, a testing center to take the exam. So, of course, there is always that option. But at the same time, we look at how else can we do it? How else can we do it? By looking at how we are administering or developing our assessment mechanisms. So again, probably or our recommendation is for assessment to focus on three core areas: critical thinking, creative problem solving, and ethical reasoning. These are the skills that demand human judgment and cannot be fully outsourced to AI. So when AI tools can generate arguments, they still lack the judgment to question their own assumptions or adapt to contradictory evidence dynamically, as what is always the response of AI. They can provide a summary or propose a solution, but they cannot fully replicate a standard's capacity to synthesize personal experiences. Therefore, we also need to shift the assessment focus from end products to learning process, or make the learning process more visible. So we will not just look at the output of the students, but we will look at how the learning process happened as the student accomplished that particular course requirement. So process-based assessment means that students need to document the journey and not just the destination, not just the output. This includes the research logs, peer feedback sessions, reflection journals, and iterative drafts that show how thinking evolves. This is probably most applicable to those to our students doing their thesis, and we look at the drafts before they would be able to come up with the final version of the manuscript. So the process-oriented artifacts reveal how students approach problems, reconsider assumptions, integrate feedback, and develop ideas over time, which are aspects of learning that AI cannot readily simulate. So like for instance, for my thesis students, I would ask them to summarize the comments that were given, the recommendations that were given, put it in a matrix, and how did they address those comments and recommendations, and their justification or rationale for doing so. So in that process, the students documenting the process of the revision and why such revision was made, we can also see the learning journey of the student, the process of learning that the student went through. So again, one concretization of this is the submission of the portfolio. We can also encourage, as part of our assessment, real-time collaboration. So in here, it can be, again, a real-time presentations with question and answer, collaborative problem-solving exercises, which will require the students to think on their feet. So again, a thesis defense is one example here. Other examples include structured interviews where students explain key concepts and their applications, group dialogues, and presentation formats with spontaneous responses. The fourth type of assessment, which we can also consider, is authentic assessment. Of course, this is not something new, but this has become more relevant in this AI era. This requires designing assessments around authentically complex problems situated in students' personal context. So we can have this, and since this is contextualized to the student's situation, it can also increase the student engagement. The other pillar under academic cluster is the learner support. What comprise learning support services in a distance learning system, and how AI can enhance the delivery of learner support for better quality learning in the online mode are the following. AI-enabled teaching assistant or tutor who can immediately respond to the queries of the students about the lesson 24/7. Should also be able to accommodate the needs of the differently abled to provide the appropriate format like the text or just the sound. The tutor, the AI-enabled tutor, will only crawl the package of learning resources developed and put together by the teacher. This will also enable the massification of course enrollment, as in the case of massive open online courses. So just last night, I was reviewing the completion report of one MOOC that I handled last month, and there were about 3,000 students, which is not humanly possible for me to really respond to their individual questions. But if there is an AI-enabled tutor or a teaching assistant, then that tutor can respond to the queries of the students. Personalized learning and recommender system. This is something that had been discussed as one affordance of artificial intelligence. It can help in two ways: scaffolding so that the learner will reach that level of discourse being done by the whole class, and the integration of self-assessment questions at the end of each module or lesson. AI can recommend relevant learning resources, and this assistance is available even outside the regular working hours, again 24/7. This is also important considering that in an online learning setup, students may be located in different time zones. The other important thing, which I think needs serious consideration among us at the Open University system, is the mental health support. There can be the AI-powered chatbots or conversational agents, which can provide immediate support to help students manage stress, anxiety, and depression. AI can also do emotional analysis by monitoring student engagement and emotional state, frustration, boredom, enthusiasm during online learning. And it can help us teachers adjust our teaching methods, and provide timely interventions. AI can also help in early detection, like AI algorithms can help teachers and institutions proactively identify students who may be at risk, or allowing for early intervention and preventing potential crisis, and also help our students complete the course. For the third cluster, that is the impact and external reach, I would like to focus on research, monitoring and evaluation of the different interventions, especially on the use of AI, is necessary for continuous data-driven decisions and policy recommendations. It is also important that we continue to be active members of our community of practice, just like what we are doing now. I mean, if there are opportunities for us to attend webinars, to listen to our peers discussing concerns that that are common to us, then it is also part of our being active members of our community of practice, so that we can share and we can learn from our peers and other experts. So again, our bottom line is, let's work with AI. Let's not prevent our students from using it. It's because we need to teach our students how to use it ethically and responsibly. It can help in the continuous improvement of the quality of our courses, programs, and the online learning that we are implementing. By using AI, it can help teachers, it can help the students, it can help the other sectors of the university in providing relevant and timely student support. And by doing so, we are already working on the different pillars of quality in online learning. AI can also help us accommodate massive enrollment. when there was that question on how we will be able to handle massive enrollment, then probably we have the answer now. AI can help us do this. It can also facilitate access and inclusion in our courses and be able to do our university social responsibility towards the achievement of SDG number 4, and that is quality lifelong learning for all. By doing so, we can say that our university is doing well its social responsibility. So the next time that we do an internal assessment of our institutions as an open university or the programs and courses that we offer online or want some guidance, when we develop our courses as teachers of online courses, we can take a look at how these pillars of quality in online learning now accommodate the use of AI with the goal of continuously enhancing the quality of education that we offer. So we can see here that from the QA framework that we develop with online learning in mind, there are certain pillars that we can look at now and tweak so that we can accommodate AI and still be able to say that what we are offering is quality education in a distance e-learning mode of instruction. So I think this is, yeah, this is my last slide. And these are the references which I use in this presentation. And yeah, so if you want to do a deep dive into those discussions, you can use these materials as well. Yeah, so thank you very much for listening, and I greet everyone a happy Wednesday morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Bandalaria. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a richly detailed journey through quality open distance e-learning in the AI era. Now, just to quickly recap what you've been taking us through, I mean, as people already in the field following the work, it's interesting how you highlighted that from the very beginning, open distance learning has been very concerned about the issue of quality. It has survived several bouts of quality doubters. First came internet, which made people think that that is the end of open distance learning. You know, we can all just plagiarize left, right, center, and where is the quality output in all that? And I think over time, people started to understand as things settled down that, you know, this affects not just open universities, but everybody else in the broad field of education. So eventually we worked through all these issues and we accepted, embraced, we did not reject internet. We served it. And then came COVID, and then came AI. And that is the biggest challenge that we are facing, as you've said. But I like precisely how, Prof, how you've structured your talk in such a way that AI is not a scary thing, nor a something which is unmanageable. You know, you've structured it very well, and it's all probably thanks to your 30 years of experience of handling all these issues, plus the fact that you've worked on the AAOU framework for quality education. So you've obviously put through, you know, put all these issues into mind and structured things in such a way that I think all of us who are in open universities or even beyond, because I would imagine that the AAOU framework does not just apply to open universities in a sense, or people just, I mean, for not just for open distance learning, but for education in general, because these are issues that we're all sharing. And probably some universities, some academics are handling this AI thing better than others. They are still struggling through. But if I can just ask you as an opening question, you know, you have structured things in a very broad, universal way, Prof. But would you agree then that each of us within our own institutions, in our own different capacities, in our own different disciplines, because different disciplines will demand different use of AI or non-use of AI, would you say that ultimately the challenge is with us, even with the framework?
Yeah, actually, yes. In fact, even for my university, we encourage colleagues in different areas, fields. For instance, computer science, those in education, in the physical science, for us to think of how we can handle, how we can really accommodate AI in our teaching. In the way we do our assessment. And that is why the institutional policy is very important. Because at the end of the day, our anchor will be the institutional policy. So like for instance, will the institution allow the students to use AI? So
Mm.
that's the very first thing. And then how? How? So like for instance, at UPOU, we ask our students, that's the very first thing that we ask them, to declare the use of AI. If they are using it in their course requirements, they have to declare it. So most of us has that, many of us, I mean, if not all of us, have that agreement or requirement in our courses, but we applied it well at different levels. So like in my case, I said, okay, if you will use AI and you will not cite it, then I will consider it as plagiarism. And that is a course policy. But that is anchored on the institutional policy
Mm.
allowing the students to use AI.
Right.
But the institutional policy also said or instructed the students
Mm.
declare your use of AI and how you use it. So it's
Right.
part of the institutional policy. But at the course level, we depending on the course that we are handling. So like in my case, I'm handling communication courses. So it's really, it's really conversational and it's very easy to use Chat GPT,
Right. Yeah.
in my course requirements. So I really have to do some tweakings here, there, in the learning activities
Mm.
so that I will accommodate the use of AI, but at the same time, still facilitate or force the students to do critical thinking, be more creative about it. So that is something that I have to integrate in the learning design. So something
Right.
like that, yes.
Okay, so based on your experience with the AAOU members, right, how many open universities do you think have managed to come up with a workable, comprehensive institutional policy to help, people within the communities that deal with AI? Is that still a work
Not,
in progress?
not many, I would say.
Mm.
Not many, I would say. There may be some generic policies like, okay, we allowed,
Mm.
but the thing is there really a public declaration of it? I mean,
Right.
like a document which the student, which the teachers can really use as reference, that look, this is the institutional policy and this is what we
Mm.
are using. So based on what I know of the many members, in fact, it is still something that what you have mentioned, it's still something that scares us. It's still something that is really putting us in the dark. I mean, how we can really handle it, especially with the very fast development of AI. I mean, you know, yesterday is just like this, and today you ask the same question, the response will be different.
Correct. Yeah.
So the development, depending on the training data that are now
Mm.
being made available.
Mm.
So we can say that, okay, as of now, this is it, but we don't know if tomorrow it's still the same. So we really have, we especially for us whose business is online learning, we really have to know what is happening out there
Correct.
if
Yeah.
our institutional policy is to embrace. But the thing is, I don't think there's any other way.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
AI is there. AI is
Yeah.
there. Whether we like it or not, our students will use it. In fact, they are paying. They are using the paid version. Probably the teachers are using the free version, and the
Yeah.
students, the
Right.
students
But
are the ones using the paid version.
yeah, you're right. I mean, it's you like it or not, it's there confronting us, and we have to deal with it, even if it sucks up a lot of our time as academics, as scholars, as teachers. We have to grapple with it and come up with some tentative solution for the time being until things evolve, and then we have to evolve along
Yeah.
as well. Right. So if I could just see if there are any questions or comments from the audience. People, if you have questions, if you want to pose them in the chat box very quickly, not too long, just straight to the point with questions or comments. Like the latest one that I've got here is from Amirul Firdaus, who says, obtaining participation from students enrolled in fully online semesters is, in my opinion, one of the difficulties in carrying out community service projects. Have you got any comments on that, Prof?
Which one? Which one is that?
The very last one
The very
from
last
Amirul
one.
Firdaus, who says that who observes that obtaining participation from students enrolled in fully online semesters is difficult for carrying out community service projects.
Well, actually, if community service projects, doing community service projects is required, in your among your students, or we can make it a requirement in our courses. So, like for instance, in my case, so they are fully online, but I ask them to do activities or projects that will involve and their community need not be a physical community.
Mm,
Then it need not be a physical community. It can be an online community. So
right,
therefore, depending on the context of the student, so they would say, okay, this is my context. Therefore, can it be my online community? So it will also this kind of context that we are in. It also redefines what a community is.
correct.
What a
Yes.
community is. So, and that's the reason why I said, I mean, part of my presentation, learner and community of practice interaction. Because there are many online communities of practice now, and we can anchor our students there. We can, I mean, they can even find it themselves. They can even find it themselves, and
Right.
then mix or be part of that community and do community projects there.
Right.
So, um, in some of my courses, I also ask them to do online projects. So, like for instance, how can you mobilize people, or what kind of social mobilization programs can you do in the cyberspace? Because look, we are all now living in the cyberspace. At least most of us now are citizens of the cyberspace. So why not do projects that can be implemented in the cyberspace? So marketing campaigns, social marketing campaigns can be done in the cyberspace. We have the digital activism, and that is done at the cyberspace. So
Right.
these
Yeah.
things, so community projects, carrying out community service projects, I believe can also be done among those students who are enrolled in a fully online semester classes. So another example, one of the requirements in our curriculum, undergraduate curriculum, is this community national service program, something that you will do something for a community. And one example that I gave at the time that they were trying to think, how can we do it online? I said, so why not connect a student to a community or to a local government unit, and the project that can be done is like developing a website.
Mm,
So that is a community project. That is a community service project. You develop a website for a local government unit, for a government agency. And that can be done online. Can be done online. So those are the examples. Those are the
yeah.
examples by which a fully online student can do community service projects. So probably it requires a redefinition or rearticulation of what a community is.
Right, thanks. That was the response to Amirul, who raised the question of how to engage students to be active online when it comes to doing community service. And the response was we have to reimagine what community service is. It need not always be a physical community. Virtual online community is just as significant these days, and there are all kinds of communities out there that we can engage. So it's a matter of reframing the course and the assessment, and then we'll have some different ways of doing things then.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for that. Do we have any last question that anybody would like to pose? No? Anyone? All right. If not, then I guess that's that, right? So thank you guys for joining us for this third SENDEF seminar. And we really appreciate you attending it. And next month we'll have another one. We will be announcing it very soon. And before we wrap up, we want to thank Professor Melinda Bandalaria again for taking her time to share with us her views on quality education. She's a global fellow of Open University, and we're very pleased to have her with us. And until next time, thank you so much, and we'll see you again.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Thanks
Thank
so
you. Good
much.
morning.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.